My stepfather controlled our family with bizarre rules and silent dinners. There was no privacy or freedom until sister had mental breakdown. When I tried to expose him, my own mother defended him and told me to move out. My stepfather Pierce, 48M, has been married to my mother Diana, 45F, for 8 years now, and he runs our household like some kind of military compound with the strangest rules I've ever heard of. My mother divorced my biological father when I was 7. She struggled as a single parent for 3 years before she met Pierce at her office job. He seemed like the perfect gentleman back then. He would bring flowers, open doors for her, and always spoke politely to us kids. My younger sister Kira, 16F, and I, 19M, actually liked him at first. Pierce owns a small construction business that apparently does very well. We moved from our cramped apartment into his large house in the suburbs about 6 months after they got married. The house has 5 bedrooms, a finished basement, and a big backyard. From the outside, everything looked perfect. But once we moved in, Pierce started implementing his house rules. At first, they seemed reasonable. Clean up after yourself. No shoes in the house. Be respectful. Normal stuff that any parent might have. Then the rules got weirder. Rule number 1, no one speaks during dinner unless Pierce asks a direct question. Not even asking someone to pass the salt. If you need something, you point at it and hope someone notices. Dinner usually lasts about 30 minutes of complete silence except for the sound of chewing. Rule number 2, none of the kids can have locks on their bedroom doors. Pierce removed all the door handles that had locks and replaced them with basic knobs. He said privacy breeds secretive behavior, and secretive behavior breeds problems. Rule number 3, when Pierce comes home from work each day, everyone in the house has to line up in the hallway to greet him. We each have to give him a hug and tell him one good thing that happened during our day. If nothing good happened, we have to make something up. Rule number 4, no one is allowed to go into the basement workshop without Pierce present. He keeps it locked at all times and says his tools are too dangerous for us to be around unsupervised. Rule number 5, absolutely no questions about his work. This one he emphasized more than all the others. He said his business dealings are complicated and boring, and he doesn't want to burden us with adult concerns. These rules annoyed me, but I figured every family has their quirks. My mother seemed happy with Pierce, and he never raised his voice or got physical with any of us. Kira adapted to the rules faster than I did, probably because she was younger when they started. The punishments for breaking rules were what really got to me. Pierce never hit anyone, but he had other methods that were somehow worse. If you broke a rule, you had to do wall sits in the living room until your legs gave out completely. I'm talking about pressing your back against the wall and sliding down until your thighs are parallel to the floor, then holding that position. The longest I ever lasted was 12 minutes before I collapsed. Kira once had to do it for breaking the dinner silence rule when she accidentally coughed too loudly. But the worst punishment was something Pierce called accountability presentations. If you broke a major rule, you had to create a PowerPoint presentation explaining what you did wrong, why it was wrong, how it affected the family, and what you would do differently next time. Then you had to present it to the entire family after dinner. Everyone else had to contribute by pointing out additional ways your behavior was problematic. Even my mother participated in these sessions. I had to do 3 accountability presentations in my first year living there. One for leaving dishes in the sink overnight. One for forgetting to greet Pierce properly when he came home because I was on a phone call. And one for asking Kira if she wanted to walk to school together, which apparently violated the no talking during breakfast rule. The strangest thing about Pierce was how different he acted outside the house. Whenever we went to family gatherings or neighborhood events, he transformed into this charming, funny guy who seemed genuinely interested in everyone around him. Neighbors would always tell my mother how lucky she was to have found such a wonderful man. Teachers at Kira's school would comment on what a supportive stepfather he seemed to be whenever he attended school events. I started noticing other odd things about Pierce over the past year. Despite owning a construction business, he rarely left the house during normal business hours. Most days, he would disappear into the basement workshop around 9 in the morning and emerge for lunch, then go back down until dinner. I could hear power tools running, but never the sounds you would expect from typical construction work. Sometimes men would come to the house to meet with Pierce. They always looked out of place in our suburban neighborhood. These guys drove expensive cars but dressed in cheap clothes. They had thick accents that sounded Eastern European, and they always seemed nervous or agitated when they arrived. Pierce would take them straight to the basement, and I could hear muffled conversations that sometimes got heated. My mother acted like these visits were completely normal. When I mentioned the strange visitors to her, she just said Pierce had many different business contacts and it wasn't our place to judge people based on their appearance. The thing that bothered me most was how Kira started changing after we lived there for a few years. She used to be outgoing and talkative, but she became quiet and careful about everything she said or did. She would flinch slightly whenever Pierce entered a room, even when she wasn't doing anything wrong. She stopped inviting friends over because she said it was too stressful to make sure everyone followed all the house rules. About 3 months ago, something happened that made me realize how bad things had gotten. Kira accidentally knocked over her water glass during one of our silent dinners. It wasn't a big spill, maybe a few ounces of water on the table. She immediately started apologizing and cleaning it up with her napkin. Pierce didn't say anything during dinner, but afterward, he announced that Kira would be doing wall sits for 20 minutes as punishment for disrupting the family meal. When I pointed out that it was clearly an accident and she had cleaned it up immediately, Pierce added another 10 minutes to her punishment for my interruption. I watched my 16-year-old sister slide down the wall and hold that position while tears ran down her face. After about 8 minutes, her legs started shaking. After 15 minutes, she was sobbing but still trying to hold the position. When she finally collapsed at 18 minutes, Pierce made her start over because she had given up before her time was finished. That night, I heard Kira crying in her room. I wanted to comfort her, but I also knew that Pierce sometimes checked on us after bedtime, and being in each other's rooms after hours was against the rules. I lay in my own bed listening to my sister cry herself to sleep, and I realized that our house had become a prison. The next morning, I tried talking to my mother privately while Pierce was in the basement. I told her that the punishments were getting too severe and that Kira was obviously struggling with the strict environment. My mother listened but then said that Pierce was just trying to teach us discipline and respect. She said that children today have too much freedom and not enough structure, and that Pierce was helping us become better people. When I suggested that maybe some of the rules were unreasonable, my mother got defensive. She said that Pierce worked hard to provide for our family and that we should be grateful for everything he had given us. She reminded me that before Pierce, we had struggled financially and lived in a tiny apartment. She said that if I didn't like the rules, I was free to move out when I turned 18. I realized then that my mother wasn't going to help. She had convinced herself that Pierce's behavior was normal, or maybe she was too afraid of losing financial security to challenge him. 2 weeks ago, I made a decision that might have been stupid, but I couldn't watch Kira suffer anymore. I set up a small camera in the living room, hidden behind some books on a shelf. I wanted to record one of the punishment sessions to show my mother later, hoping that seeing it from an outside perspective might help her understand how wrong this was. I didn't have to wait long. Kira broke the basement rule by accidentally opening the workshop door while looking for the laundry room. She claimed she forgot which door was which, but Pierce didn't care about the reason. The punishment session I recorded was worse than I expected. Pierce made Kira do wall sits for 40 minutes total, with brief breaks only when she completely collapsed. While she held the position, he stood over her criticizing everything about her attitude and behavior over the past week. He said she was becoming disrespectful and ungrateful, and that she needed to learn appreciation for everything the family had provided for her. When Kira finally finished the wall sits, Pierce announced that she would also need to prepare an accountability presentation about respect and gratitude, to be delivered the following evening. I have the entire session recorded on my phone now. When I watch it back, I can see how terrifying and humiliating the whole thing was. Kira looks exhausted and defeated by the end. This is my 16-year-old sister being broken down by a grown man who is supposed to be taking care of her. I tried showing the video to my mother yesterday while Pierce was meeting with one of his basement visitors. I thought she would finally see how extreme things had become. Instead, she got angry with me for secretly recording family interactions. She said I had violated everyone's privacy and that I was trying to make Pierce look bad by capturing him during a necessary disciplinary moment. She demanded that I delete the video immediately and promise never to record anything in the house again. When I refused, she said she was disappointed in me for trying to undermine my stepfather's authority. She said that if I couldn't respect the family structure, maybe I should consider moving out sooner rather than later. Now I don't know what to do. I'm 19 and technically an adult, but I don't have enough money saved to move out on my own yet. More importantly, I can't abandon Kira in this situation. She's stuck here for 2 more years until she graduates high school, and I'm the only one who seems to recognize how damaging this environment is for her. I've been thinking about showing the video to a school counselor or maybe calling some kind of family services hotline, but I'm not sure if what Pierce does would be considered abuse since he doesn't hit anyone. The punishments are weird and excessive, but I don't know if they're illegal. Has anyone else dealt with a situation like this? How do you help someone who doesn't want to be helped? My mother seems to think everything is fine, and Kira has been trained not to complain about anything. I feel like I'm the only one who sees how wrong all of this is. Update 1: I didn't expect so many people to respond to my post. A lot of you told me to call authorities or get help immediately, and some of you shared similar stories that made me realize our situation was worse than I thought. I took your advice and called a hotline for family services. I explained the whole situation and asked if the punishments and rules would be considered abuse. The woman I spoke with said that while the behavior sounded concerning, it would be difficult to prove abuse without physical harm or clear evidence of psychological damage. She suggested documenting everything and said they could investigate if I filed a formal report. The problem is, I tried to get Kira to support me in this, and she completely shut down. When I approached her about the possibility of getting outside help, she became panicked and begged me not to involve anyone else. She said that if authorities got involved and nothing came of it, Pierce would make our lives much worse. She also said that at least now she knows what the rules are, and she can avoid punishments by following them perfectly. This response from Kira made me realize how much damage had already been done. She's so afraid of making things worse that she'd rather live in this controlled environment than risk any change. I decided to try a different approach. Instead of going to authorities first, I would try to gather more evidence and maybe find allies within our extended family. My plan started with learning more about Pierce's business. I began paying closer attention to his basement activities and the strange visitors. I started keeping a notebook hidden in my room where I wrote down dates, times, and descriptions of everything unusual I observed. The breakthrough came about 10 days ago. Pierce had left his laptop open on the kitchen counter while he went to answer the front door. I had maybe 30 seconds before he would be back, so I quickly took photos of his email inbox with my phone. Most of the emails looked like normal business correspondence, but there were several from addresses that looked suspicious. Email addresses with random numbers and letters, or names that didn't match any legitimate construction companies I could find online. One email thread caught my attention because the subject line mentioned cash payments and avoiding paper trails. I only had time to photograph the preview text, but it was enough to confirm that Pierce was involved in something shady. I also noticed that Pierce received a lot of cash payments that he never deposited in a bank. Instead, he would take the money straight to his basement workshop. I started watching for patterns and realized that the days when he received large cash amounts were the same days when the strange visitors would come by. Armed with this information, I decided to reach out to my uncle David, who is my mother's brother. David had always been skeptical of Pierce, though he never said anything directly. During family gatherings, I noticed that David would watch Pierce carefully and never seemed completely comfortable around him. I called David and asked if I could meet him for coffee without telling my mother. I explained that I needed advice about a family situation. He agreed to meet me that weekend. When I sat down with David, I explained everything about the house rules, the punishments, and Kira's deteriorating state. I also told him about my suspicions regarding Pierce's business activities. David listened carefully and didn't seem surprised by any of it. Then David told me something that changed everything. He said that about 2 years ago, he had tried to research Pierce's construction business because something about the man bothered him. David works in finance and knows how to investigate business records. What he found was that Pierce's company existed on paper but had no verifiable contracts, no business insurance, and no employees other than Pierce himself. David had also discovered that Pierce had lived in 3 different states over the past 10 years, and in each location, he had registered similar small businesses that lasted exactly 2 to 3 years before disappearing. David said he had tried to discuss his findings with my mother at the time, but she became defensive and accused him of trying to sabotage her relationship because he was jealous of her happiness. After that conversation, David backed off because he didn't want to damage his relationship with his sister. But now, with my new information about cash payments and suspicious visitors, David felt we had enough pieces to understand what was probably happening. He believed Pierce was likely running some kind of money laundering operation, using the construction business as a front. David offered to help me gather more concrete evidence, and he also promised to be there for Kira and me if we needed support. He said he regretted not pushing harder 2 years ago when he first had suspicions. We developed a plan. David would use his financial background to research Pierce's business activities more thoroughly. I would continue documenting the household situation and try to get better evidence of the basement operations. But before we could put this plan into action, Pierce made a mistake that accelerated everything. Last Tuesday, Kira came home from school 15 minutes late because her teacher had kept the class behind to discuss a project. This had never happened before, and Kira had no way to call ahead since Pierce doesn't allow us to use phones during school hours. When Kira walked in the door, Pierce was waiting in the hallway. He immediately launched into a lecture about punctuality and respect for family schedules. He said that Kira's lateness showed a fundamental lack of consideration for others and that she needed to learn the consequences of poor time management. Pierce announced that Kira would be doing wall sits for 1 hour, with 5-minute breaks every 15 minutes. But this time, during each break, she would have to recite a list of all the ways her behavior had been selfish and inconsiderate. I watched the first 15 minutes of this punishment and realized that Kira was at her breaking point. Her legs were shaking badly, and she looked like she might faint. When Pierce called the first break and demanded that Kira start reciting her failures, she just stared at him with empty eyes. That's when Pierce did something he had never done before. He grabbed Kira by the shoulders and shook her while yelling that she needed to show proper remorse for her actions. He didn't hit her, but the physical contact and the volume of his voice were completely different from his usual controlled approach. Kira started crying and apologizing repeatedly, which seemed to satisfy Pierce. He made her continue with the punishment, but I could see that something had fundamentally changed. The mask of controlled discipline had slipped, and what I saw underneath was genuine anger and the potential for worse. After Kira finished her punishment and went to bed, I made a decision. I called David and told him what had happened. I also called the Family Services hotline again and told them that I was ready to file a formal report. David said he would drive over the next morning to pick up Kira and me, and that we could stay at his house while authorities investigated. He said he had gathered enough information about Pierce's business activities to support our claims that something illegal was happening. I'm writing this update from David's house. Kira and I left yesterday morning while Pierce was in his basement workshop. We took only essential items and left a note for my mother explaining where we were going. My mother has called me 6 times since yesterday, but I haven't answered. David spoke with her and explained that Kira and I were staying with him temporarily while some family issues got sorted out. He didn't give her details about the investigation we were starting. The Family Services caseworker is coming to interview Kira and me tomorrow morning. David has also contacted a lawyer who specializes in financial crimes, and we're going to turn over all the evidence we've gathered about Pierce's suspicious business activities. Kira seems different already, just after 1 day away from that house. She's still quiet and careful, but I caught her laughing at something on TV last night. She hasn't laughed in months. I know this is just the beginning and that things are going to get complicated. My mother is probably going to be angry with us for leaving and for involving authorities. But I couldn't watch Kira deteriorate any further, and I couldn't live in that controlled environment anymore. Update 2: The past month and a half has been a whirlwind of meetings, interviews, and revelations that I never could have predicted. I wanted to update everyone who offered support and advice, because the situation has developed in ways that went far beyond what I originally thought we were dealing with. The Family Services investigation moved quickly once Kira and I provided our statements and evidence. The caseworker who interviewed us said that while the household rules and punishments were concerning, what really caught their attention were the details about Pierce's business operations and the suspicious visitors. Kira did better during her interview than I expected. She was able to clearly explain how the rules and punishments had affected her daily life, and she showed the caseworker some marks on her legs from doing wall sits on rough carpet. The caseworker said Kira showed classic signs of psychological stress and that the living situation was definitely harmful to her well-being. But the real bombshell came when the financial crimes lawyer David had contacted brought in a federal investigator to look at the evidence we had gathered about Pierce's business. It turns out that Pierce wasn't just running a money laundering operation. He was part of a larger network that was smuggling stolen construction equipment and materials across state lines. The Eastern European visitors I had seen were connected to a group that stole heavy machinery from construction sites and then sold it through fake businesses like Pierce's company. The investigator explained that Pierce would purchase stolen equipment at very low prices, then create fake invoices and business records to make it look like he had bought the equipment legitimately. He would then sell it to unsuspecting construction companies in other states for near market prices. The cash payments I had observed were Pierce buying stolen goods, and his basement workshop was where he would clean, repaint, or modify equipment to remove serial numbers and make the items harder to trace. Federal agents raided our house while Kira and I were staying at David's place. They found thousands of dollars in cash hidden in the basement, along with equipment for altering serial numbers and a whole filing system of fake business documents. But the most shocking discovery was a second set of books that Pierce had been keeping, which showed that his operation was much larger than anyone had realized. He had been running this scam for over 5 years and had moved hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of stolen equipment. When Pierce was arrested, he immediately tried to make a deal with prosecutors by giving up information about the larger network. This is where things got scary for our family. The investigator told David that Pierce's cooperation with law enforcement might make him a target for the criminal organization he had been working with. The people who had been supplying him with stolen equipment wouldn't want him to reveal their identities or methods. 3 days after Pierce's arrest, someone broke into David's house while we were all at work and school. Nothing was stolen, but the house was thoroughly searched. David's computers were opened, drawers were emptied, and papers were scattered everywhere. The police said it looked like someone was looking for specific documents or information. The federal investigator assigned a security detail to watch David's house and advised us that we might need to relocate temporarily for our safety. Kira and I were terrified that we had made everything worse by exposing Pierce. My mother's reaction to all of this has been the most difficult part to deal with. When Pierce was arrested, she initially refused to believe any of the charges. She insisted that there had been some kind of mistake and that Pierce was being framed by business competitors. But when federal agents showed her the evidence they had found in the basement, she couldn't deny what had been happening in her own house. She was questioned extensively about whether she knew about Pierce's illegal activities. My mother swore that she had no knowledge of the criminal operation, and investigators seemed to believe her. But she was devastated to learn that her husband had been using their home as a base for illegal activities and that he had put the whole family at risk. The hardest conversation was when my mother finally understood how the strict household rules had been affecting Kira and me. When the Family Services caseworker explained that Kira was showing signs of psychological trauma, my mother broke down crying. She said that she had convinced herself that Pierce's discipline methods were just old-fashioned strictness, and that she had ignored her own instincts because she was afraid of losing financial security. She admitted that she had noticed Kira becoming withdrawn and anxious, but she had attributed it to normal teenage behavior. My mother apologized to both Kira and me for not protecting us from Pierce's controlling behavior. She said that she had been so grateful to have financial stability that she had ignored warning signs about Pierce's character and business activities. The federal investigator recommended that our family relocate to a different city until Pierce's case was resolved and they could determine whether we were still at risk from his criminal associates. My mother agreed to move, and David offered to help us find a place in a city about 4 hours away where he had business connections. 2 weeks ago, we moved into a rental house in our new city. It's smaller than Pierce's house, but it feels completely different. Kira and I each have locks on our bedroom doors. We talk during dinner. We don't have to line up to greet anyone or ask permission for basic activities. The change in Kira has been remarkable. She started laughing again within a few days of moving to the new house. She's been eating better and sleeping through the night instead of having the nightmares that had become normal for her. She even asked if she could invite a friend over, which she hadn't done in over 2 years. My mother is still processing everything that happened, but she's been making an effort to give Kira and me space to make our own decisions about daily activities. She asks for our input on household rules and actually listens to our opinions about things like curfews and responsibilities. We found out last week that Pierce pleaded guilty to federal charges related to the stolen equipment operation. His cooperation with investigators led to the arrest of 12 other people involved in the network, including the men who had been coming to our house. The prosecutor said that Pierce will likely serve between 8 and 12 years in federal prison. He also has to pay restitution to the construction companies that bought stolen equipment from him, which means he will lose his house and most of his assets. My mother has filed for divorce and is working with a lawyer to make sure that Pierce can't claim any rights to property or custody when he's eventually released from prison. Kira and I are both enrolled in our new school and are slowly adjusting to life in a different city. Kira seems to be thriving in an environment where she can speak freely and doesn't have to worry about accidentally breaking arbitrary rules. For me, the biggest adjustment has been learning to trust that we're actually safe now. For months, I was constantly worried about Kira and constantly strategizing about how to protect her. Now I have to learn how to just be a normal college student without carrying the weight of family crisis. We still have federal protection for a few more weeks until investigators are confident that Pierce's former associates are no longer a threat to our family. After that, we'll be able to live normally without looking over our shoulders. Update 3. I wanted to post one final update because several people have been asking how Kira and I are adjusting to our new life, and because there have been a few more developments in Pierce's case that close this chapter for our family. First, the good news. Kira and I have both settled into our new school and city much better than I expected. Kira has made 3 close friends and joined the drama club, which has been amazing to see. She auditioned for a small role in the school's winter play and got a speaking part. Watching her practice her lines and get excited about rehearsals reminds me of who she used to be before Pierce entered our lives. For me, adjusting to college courses in a new place has been challenging but manageable. I'm studying business administration and working part-time at David's friend's accounting firm. The work helps me feel productive and gives me some independence while I figure out my longer-term plans. The biggest change is in our family dynamics. My mother has been working hard to rebuild trust with Kira and me. She found a job at a medical office and has been consistently asking for our opinions about family decisions instead of just making announcements about rules and expectations. About 3 weeks ago, my mother sat Kira and me down for a conversation that I think was necessary but difficult. She explained that during her marriage to Pierce, she had gradually lost confidence in her own judgment about what was normal or healthy for families. She said that Pierce had been very subtle in the way he convinced her that his rules were reasonable and that Kira and I were just being typical rebellious teenagers when we complained. She admitted that she had been so afraid of being a single parent again that she had ignored her instincts when things felt wrong. My mother asked Kira and me what we needed from her going forward to feel safe and supported. Kira said she wanted to be able to have friends over without worrying about following complicated rules. I said I wanted her to listen when we raised concerns about anything, even if those concerns seemed minor to her. We agreed that our new household would operate on basic principles of respect and communication rather than rigid rules. We have weekly family meetings where we discuss any issues or changes that need to be made. So far, this approach has worked much better than any system we've had before. The federal protection ended 4 weeks ago after investigators confirmed that the criminal network Pierce had been part of was completely disrupted. 8 people besides Pierce were convicted and sentenced, including the 2 men who had been regular visitors to our house. We learned that the break-in at David's house had been carried out by associates of Pierce's partners who were looking for evidence that might implicate them in the stolen equipment operation. Once those people were arrested, the threat to our family was eliminated. Pierce's sentencing hearing took place 2 weeks ago. He received 10 years in federal prison and was ordered to pay over $400,000 in restitution to victims of the equipment theft ring. The judge said that Pierce's cooperation with investigators was the only reason his sentence wasn't longer. My mother, Kira, and I were given the opportunity to provide victim impact statements for the sentencing hearing. Kira decided she didn't want to participate, which everyone respected. My mother wrote a statement about how Pierce's criminal activities had put our family at risk and forced us to abandon our home and community. I chose to give my statement in person. I focused on how Pierce's need for control and secrecy had created a toxic environment for our family, and how his illegal activities had terrorized Kira and me even after we escaped his direct influence. The judge thanked me for speaking and said that Pierce's case was a good example of how criminal behavior often involves victimizing family members as well as business partners and customers. Pierce showed no reaction during any of the victim statements. His lawyer had advised him to remain silent throughout the proceedings. He was led away immediately after sentencing and will serve his time at a federal facility about 6 hours from our new city. The divorce between Pierce and my mother was finalized last week. Pierce signed away all parental rights and agreed never to contact Kira or me in the future. My mother will receive a small portion of the proceeds when Pierce's house is sold to pay restitution, but most of his assets will go to his victims. Kira and I have both decided that we don't want any contact with Pierce, even through letters or phone calls. We want to move forward with our lives without any reminders of the fear and control we experienced in his house. Our new city feels like home now. Kira has been invited to audition for the lead role in the spring musical, and she's been working with a vocal coach to prepare. She talks about wanting to study theater in college, which is the first time I've heard her express enthusiasm about future plans in years. I've been accepted to continue my business degree at the local university's satellite campus, and I plan to keep working part-time while finishing school. David has offered me a permanent position at his firm after I graduate, which would allow me to stay in this city and maintain the stability Kira and I have built here. The most important thing I learned from this experience is that trusting your instincts about someone's behavior is crucial, even when other people are telling you that your concerns are overblown or unreasonable. For too long, Kira and I accepted Pierce's control because we were told it was normal discipline or structure. I also learned that speaking up about abuse or manipulation is worth the risk, even when you're not sure if anyone will believe you or help you. The family services caseworker told me that many cases of psychological abuse go unreported because victims are afraid that their situations aren't severe enough to warrant intervention. Kira and I are both in a much better place now than we were 8 months ago when I first posted about our situation. We have a stable home, supportive relationships, and most importantly, the freedom to make our own choices about daily activities without fear of arbitrary punishment. I want to thank everyone who responded to my original post and updates with advice and encouragement. Many of you shared your own experiences with controlling family members or toxic households, and those stories helped me understand that Kira and I weren't alone in dealing with this kind of situation. For anyone who might be in a similar situation, I would encourage you to document everything you can and reach out for help from trusted adults outside your immediate family. The process of getting help was complicated and sometimes scary, but it was absolutely worth it for the freedom and safety we have now. Kira and I are looking forward to building normal, healthy lives without fear or control. We're done with that chapter and ready for whatever comes next. Now let's move to the next story. Story 2. I blackmailed my toxic sister-in-law with evidence of her affair to make her stop being mean to everyone, but then found out her husband was cheating too and everything fell apart. I, 34F, have been married to my husband Tom, 36M, for 8 years now. This story involves my sister-in-law Sarah, 39F, who has always been extremely difficult to deal with. I need to give some background about Sarah first because it's important to understand why things got to this point. Sarah has always been the problem child in the family. From what Tom told me, their parents always walked on eggshells around her because she would throw massive tantrums even as a teenager if things didn't go her way. When she was 16, she once smashed all the windows in their house because their parents wouldn't let her go to a party. Instead of punishing her, they just paid for the repairs and tried to keep her happy to avoid more incidents. Their mom Delilah, 65F, and dad Steve, 67M, basically gave up on disciplining her after she set fire to her bedroom when they grounded her at age 14. They were so afraid she would hurt herself or someone else that they started giving in to all her demands. This created a pattern that followed Sarah into adulthood. Whenever she didn't get her way, she would escalate things until everyone gave in. I first met Sarah at a family dinner when Tom and I started dating. She spent the entire evening making snide comments about my job, my clothes, and even my family background. When I tried to stand up for myself, she threw her wine glass at the wall and stormed out. Tom's parents immediately started apologizing to her, not me, and Tom explained that's just how they handle Sarah to keep the peace. Sarah got married to her husband James, 41M, about 12 years ago, and he's probably the nicest guy I've ever met. He's successful, kind, and somehow puts up with all of Sarah's drama. Their wedding was a perfect example of her behavior. She fired 3 wedding planners, made 2 bridesmaids quit the wedding party, and threatened to cancel the whole thing 3 times because things weren't perfect enough for her. James just kept writing checks and smoothing things over. Every family gathering since I've known them has been a potential battlefield. Sarah has specific demands for every holiday. She needs to be served first, she needs the best seat, her food preferences have to be catered to, and everyone has to praise whatever gift she brings. If these unspoken rules aren't followed, she creates a scene. Last Christmas was particularly bad. Sarah threw a fit because my mother-in-law served turkey instead of ham, which Sarah preferred. She literally flipped the entire dining table, ruining everyone's dinner, and stormed out. No one said anything. They just cleaned up and acted like it was normal. Tom's parents even apologized to her later for not checking her preference first. I spent hours helping clean cranberry sauce off the walls while everyone talked about how we should have known better. At my wedding, she showed up in a white dress because she claimed blue, our wedding color, didn't suit her complexion. When I tried to object, my mother-in-law begged me to let it go to avoid drama. Sarah then demanded to be in all the family photos, even the ones that were supposed to be just me and Tom. Our photographer quit halfway through because Sarah kept screaming at her about angles and lighting. She's made multiple waitresses cry at restaurants, gotten several people fired from their jobs by complaining to their managers, and even got her neighbor's dog taken away by animal control by making false complaints. The poor dog had done nothing except bark when Sarah was trying to take her afternoon nap. The neighbors had to move away because Sarah kept calling the police on them for every little thing. Even at work functions, she causes problems. James is a partner at a law firm, and Sarah has gotten 3 of his associates transferred to different departments because she didn't like how they looked at her at company parties. She once threw a drink at a senior partner's wife because the woman was wearing the same dress as her. James had to make a substantial donation to the partner's favorite charity to smooth things over. The family's standard response is always that's just how Sarah is and it's easier to give in than deal with her anger. Even Tom, who is usually very protective of me, asks me to just ignore her behavior. Last Thanksgiving, she called me fat and suggested I should consider gastric bypass surgery. When I started crying, Tom's only response was, "You know she doesn't mean it, she's just being Sarah." I've been doing that for 8 years, swallowing my pride and letting her walk all over everyone. I've watched her make kids cry at birthday parties because the attention wasn't on her. I've seen her reduce shop assistants to tears because they didn't have her size in stock. I've witnessed her throw tantrums at restaurants because her steak was medium instead of medium rare. What happened last week changed everything. I work from home as a graphic designer, and my office window faces the street. Sarah often visits James for lunch as his office is near our house. Last Tuesday, I saw her car parked outside, but instead of heading to James's office, she got into another car with some guy. I thought it was weird but didn't think much of it. This continued for several days, and my curiosity got the better of me. I started taking videos of her getting into this mystery man's car. I could clearly see it was the same man each time, tall, dark-haired, driving a black BMW. Sarah would spend about 2 hours with him each time, then return to her car and drive away. Then yesterday, everything came to a head. Sarah and James had a massive fight right outside our house. James was crying and shouting about someone named Mike, and Sarah was screaming back at him. She was yelling that he was paranoid and crazy, but I knew better. Mike must be the guy she's been meeting. I know it was wrong, but I saw an opportunity. I edited all the videos together, showing Sarah getting into Mike's car on different days, along with timestamps. Then I texted them to Sarah with a simple message: be nice to everyone or James gets these videos. Sarah called me immediately, crying and begging me not to show James. She tried to explain that Mike was just a friend, but we both knew that was a lie. I told her my conditions were simple: she needs to start treating everyone with respect, apologize for her past behavior, and make amends. Otherwise, James would see all the evidence of her affair. She agreed, but now I'm wondering if I went too far. Tom doesn't know about any of this, and neither does the rest of the family. They just think Sarah has had a miraculous personality change. She's been overly nice at recent family gatherings, apologizing for past behavior, and even sent my mother-in-law flowers. Yesterday she helped clean up after dinner without being asked, and everyone was looking at her like she had been replaced by a pod person. I feel slightly guilty about the blackmail, but after 8 years of watching her terrorize everyone and facing no consequences, I think she deserved it. Everyone seems happier now that she's behaving better, even if they don't know why. But am I the asshole for handling it this way? Update 1: things got more complicated than I expected. Sarah has been keeping her end of the bargain these past 2 weeks, being nice to everyone, apologizing for past behavior, and generally acting like a decent human being. The family is shocked by her transformation. Last weekend, she even helped my mother-in-law reorganize her entire kitchen without a single complaint or outburst. The changes in her behavior are actually pretty dramatic. Last Tuesday, we were at a restaurant for Tom's birthday dinner. The waiter got her order wrong, bringing her salmon instead of steak. The old Sarah would have thrown the plate across the room. She did exactly that last year at her own birthday dinner. But this time, she just smiled and politely asked if they could fix it. Everyone at the table was staring at her like she had grown a second head. She's been sending random gifts to family members too. My mother-in-law got flowers, Tom's cousin received an apology card for ruining her baby's shower 3 years ago, Sarah had announced her own pregnancy at the shower, which turned out to be a false alarm, and she even sent a wedding gift to Tom's other sister whose wedding she ruined back in 2019 by getting drunk and giving a speech about how the groom was settling for less. But last week, something happened that made me question everything. I was having coffee with James's sister Amy, 43F, who I've become friends with over the years. We usually meet at this little cafe near her office every other Wednesday. She seemed distracted and worried, not her usual chatty self. When I asked what was wrong, she started talking about how worried she was about James because he's been acting strange lately. According to Amy, James has been staying at the office until 11 p.m. most nights, claiming he's working on a big case. But when she called the office one night looking for him, his secretary said he'd left hours ago. He's been being secretive with his phone too, taking calls in another room, tilting the screen away when anyone walks by, and Amy once saw him delete all his text messages when Sarah asked to use his phone to make a call. He's been making excuses to miss family events too. He missed his own father's retirement party last month, claiming he had a work emergency. Amy later found out from another partner at the firm that there was no emergency that night. He's been withdrawn at family gatherings he does attend, constantly checking his phone and making excuses to step outside for calls. That's when Amy dropped the bombshell. James has been seeing his secretary, Jessica, for the past 6 months. Amy knew because she saw them together at an Italian restaurant in Millbrook, a town about an hour away where her daughter goes to college. They weren't even trying to be discreet, holding hands across the table, feeding each other bites of food, and she saw them kiss when they thought no one was looking. Amy had been keeping this secret because she didn't want to hurt Sarah, despite how awful Sarah had been to everyone. She showed me pictures she took at the restaurant. There was no mistaking it was James and his secretary. Amy was torn about whether to tell Sarah, especially now that Sarah seems to be trying to become a better person. I felt sick to my stomach. Here I was, blackmailing Sarah about her affair with Mike, when James was doing the exact same thing. The worst part? Sarah seems to have genuinely been trying to change. Tom mentioned yesterday that she's been going to anger management classes 3 times a week. He knew because he ran into her coming out of the counseling center when he was getting coffee next door. She's been making real efforts to repair relationships with family members too. Last week, she spent an entire day helping Tom's cousin move into her new apartment, the same cousin whose dog she got taken away 2 years ago. She's been babysitting for Tom's other sister, even though she previously claimed she hated children and refused to be around them. I couldn't keep this information to myself, so I called Sarah and asked her to meet me at a park far from both our houses. When I told her about James's affair, she broke down completely. She didn't even try to maintain her usual composed facade, she just sat on the park bench and sobbed. Several people walking by gave us concerned looks, but she didn't even notice. Through her tears, she revealed that she had suspected something was going on with James for months. She had found lipstick on his collar that wasn't hers, smelled unfamiliar perfume on his clothes, and noticed large withdrawals from their joint account that he couldn't explain. That's why she started seeing Mike. She didn't want to believe James would cheat on her, so she did it first to make herself feel better about her suspicions. She admitted that Mike was a personal trainer at her gym. She had started confiding in him about her suspicions regarding James, and one thing led to another. She said she hated herself for it, but she was so angry and hurt by her suspicions about James that she wanted to hurt him back, even if he never found out. Now I feel terrible about blackmailing her. Sarah might have been horrible to everyone, but finding out about James's affair explains some of her recent outbursts. The time she threw a fit about the seating arrangement at Easter dinner? It was right after she found the lipstick on James's collar. The Christmas dinner table flipping incident? That was the day after she discovered those unexplained withdrawals. The guilt is eating me alive. I've been using her affair to force her to be nice, while she's been dealing with her own husband's infidelity. She begged me not to tell James about Mike, saying she wants to work on their marriage, but I don't know what to do anymore. Do I keep blackmailing her to maintain this new, nicer version of Sarah? Do I tell her that Amy has actual proof of James's affair? The whole situation is so much messier than I thought, and I feel like I'm in way over my head. Update 2: Everything blew up in the worst possible way this week. After carrying around the guilt of blackmailing Sarah and knowing about James's affair, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to come clean to Tom about everything: the videos of Sarah with Mike, the blackmail, and what I learned from Amy about James and his secretary. I told Tom everything last Sunday night after dinner. I expected him to be angry with me, to tell me I was just as bad as Sarah for resorting to blackmail. But his reaction was completely different. He just sat there quietly for a long time, then asked me if I wanted to know the real reason everyone tolerated Sarah's behavior for so long. That's when Tom revealed something I never knew: Sarah isn't actually his full sister. Apparently, their mom had an affair years ago with a coworker, and Sarah was the result. Their dad knew but chose to raise her as his own. The only people who knew were their parents and Tom. He found out by accident when he was 15. He overheard his parents arguing about it during one of Sarah's episodes. Tom thinks this knowledge is what made everyone so tolerant of Sarah's behavior. Their mom overcompensated out of guilt, their dad tried extra hard to prove he loved her the same as his biological children, and Tom felt protective of her because he knew she was carrying around a burden she didn't even know about. He said there were so many times he wanted to tell her, especially when she would scream about how she felt like she didn't belong in the family. I was still processing this revelation when Sarah showed up at our door, mascara running down her face and shaking like a leaf. She had finally confronted James about his affair. She told him she knew he was seeing Jessica, his secretary. He tried to deny it at first, but when she mentioned the specific restaurant in Millbrook where Amy had seen them, he broke down and confessed. Their fight got so bad that the neighbors called the police. Sarah had started throwing things, not out of her usual anger, but out of pure heartbreak. She described watching James's face as he admitted to a 6-month affair with Jessica, how he claimed he fell in love with her, how different she was from Sarah. He told Sarah that Jessica was gentle and kind, everything Sarah wasn't. But that wasn't even the worst part. In the middle of their fight, Sarah's phone kept buzzing with text messages from me about meeting up to discuss the blackmail situation. James grabbed her phone, thinking she was texting Mike. He managed to unlock it, he knew her password, and found all our conversations, including the videos I sent her of her meetings with Mike. James is now threatening to show everyone the videos unless Sarah agrees to a divorce where he keeps most of their assets. He's claiming that her affair started first, it didn't, and that she drove him to cheat. He's already shown the videos to his lawyer and is threatening to use them to prove she was an unfit wife. Sarah had nowhere else to go, so she's staying in our guest room now. She's not the same angry person anymore, she's completely broken. Last night, after Tom told her the truth about her parentage, she just sat on the guest bed staring at the wall for hours. She told me that her anger issues stemmed from always feeling different from the rest of the family, like she didn't belong. She said she always felt like her parents were trying too hard with her, like they were overcompensating for something, but she never knew why until now. The truth about her biological father explains so much. Her anger issues started around age 12 when she first started noticing how different she looked from Tom and their other siblings. She was the only one with green eyes and dark hair in a family of blue-eyed blondes. She said she used to stand in front of the mirror for hours, trying to find any family resemblance. Things are tense in the house now. Sarah barely eats or speaks. Tom is struggling with guilt over keeping the secret for so long. I feel terrible about the blackmail, which now seems so petty compared to everything else that's come out. James keeps calling and texting, alternating between threatening to expose Sarah's affair and begging her to come back home. Yesterday, Sarah asked Tom for information about her biological father. Apparently, he's still alive and living just 2 states away. She's thinking about contacting him, but she's terrified of causing even more drama in the family. Tom's parents don't know that we know the truth, and Sarah isn't sure if she should confront them about keeping this secret her entire life. I don't know how this is going to end, but I know things will never be the same for this family again. My attempt to fix Sarah's behavior through blackmail has led to the unraveling of decades of family secrets, and I'm not sure if that's a good thing or not. Update 3: The past few months have been an absolute roller coaster for everyone involved. After everything came out, Sarah and James got divorced. He did end up showing the videos to the family, but it completely backfired on him because Amy came forward about his affair too. She showed everyone the pictures of him with Jessica at the restaurant, and even provided receipts showing he'd been taking Jessica to expensive hotels using the joint account he shared with Sarah. The divorce was messy. James tried to paint Sarah as the villain, but his lawyer dropped him when evidence of his own affair came to light. Sarah's new lawyer, recommended by Amy, surprisingly, was ruthless. She not only got Sarah half of everything but also proved that James had been embezzling money from his law firm to fund his affair. He ended up losing his partnership at the firm, and Jessica got fired too. Sarah moved to another state for a fresh start last month. She found a job as an event coordinator in Boston, which is ironic considering how many events she ruined over the years. Before leaving, she had a long talk with her parents about her real father. It didn't go well at first. Her mom broke down completely and her dad just walked out of the house. But they talked again a few days later, and more truth came out. It turns out her biological father, Mark, had wanted to be part of her life from the beginning. He had even offered to pay child support and stay away if they would just tell Sarah the truth when she was old enough. But their mom had chosen her marriage instead, and they made Mark promise to never contact Sarah. He kept that promise but had been keeping track of her life from a distance. Sarah found him on Facebook and reached out. They met for coffee when she was looking at apartments in Boston, and it was like looking in a mirror. They have the same green eyes, same dark hair, same mannerisms. Mark has 2 other daughters who look just like Sarah, and they've been incredibly welcoming to their new sister. The most surprising thing is that Sarah and I have become close friends. We talk almost every day, and she's like a different person now. Last week, she called me crying because she had snapped at a barista and immediately felt terrible about it. The old Sarah would never have cared about a stranger's feelings. She's in therapy, her choice, not anyone's suggestion, and she's working through her anger issues. Her therapist helped her understand that her rage was really just pain from feeling like an outsider in her own family. She actually apologized to me for all the years of awful behavior, and I apologized for the blackmail. We both agreed that we handled things badly, but maybe it was necessary for all these secrets to come out. Sarah said she feels free for the first time in her life, free from her anger, free from her parents' overcompensating guilt, and free from James's manipulation. Tom's parents are having a hard time dealing with everything being out in the open after so many years. Their mom had a minor breakdown and spent a week in the hospital. Their dad is trying to maintain relationships with both Sarah and James, which is causing tension with everyone. Tom is just relieved that he doesn't have to carry the secret anymore, though he feels guilty for not telling Sarah sooner. The extended family is still processing everything. Some relatives have sided with James, claiming Sarah's behavior over the years justified his affair. Others are firmly on Sarah's side, especially after learning about her parentage. Holiday gatherings are going to be awkward for a long time. Sarah is doing better now, building a new life away from all the drama. She's dating someone new, a divorced dad who she met in therapy, and she says he's teaching her patience and kindness. She might not be the nicest person yet, but she's trying, and this time it's for herself, not because someone is forcing her. Last week, she even reached out to some people she had hurt in the past to apologize. I guess sometimes you need everything to fall apart before you can build something better. The family will never be the same, but maybe that's not such a bad thing. The old Sarah is gone, and while the new Sarah isn't perfect, she's genuinely trying to be better. As for me, I learned that blackmail, even with good intentions, usually makes things worse, but sometimes worse is what needs to happen for anything to get better.